In 753 BC, amidst the rolling hills along the Tiber River, the new city of Rome was born. Its foundation would shape the world as we know it. But it wasn't built by accident. This city had a purpose, a destiny. Legend tells us that Romulus, the first king of Rome, founded this city, standing proudly on what would later be known as the Seven Hills, a city destined for greatness, for conquest, and for rule. The tale of Romulus and his twin brother Remus is one of the most iconic in Roman lore. Two abandoned children raised by a she-wolf, destined to found one of the greatest empires in history. Yet, it is a tale of rivalry and tragedy. After killing his brother in a quarrel over the city's name, Romulus stands alone as the first king. This moment marks the beginning of Rome's royal legacy, an era that would see 7 kings in total, each shaping the city's future. Under Romulus's reign, Rome was born into a kingdom, not just a city-state. The foundations of governance, military strategy, and social order were laid during this early time. But what of the future? Who would carry the mantle of leadership after Romulus? His death in 717 BC marked the transition from one king to the next, as Rome's destiny was now tied to a new ruler, Numa Pompilius. Numa Pompilius, Rome's second king, was not a warrior like Romulus, but a man of peace. He turned Rome's focus inward, establishing the religious and legal foundations that would guide Roman life for centuries. Temples to gods like Jupiter and Mars were built, and sacred rites were instituted, cementing the importance of religion in Roman society. Numa also reformed the calendar, setting Rome's timekeeping on a course that would influence the world long after. In 673 BC, the warlike Tullus Hostilius ascended the throne as Rome's third king. Under Tullus's reign, the focus shifted back to conquest and expansion. Rome began to spread its influence beyond its hills. The Sabines were defeated, and Rome's military prowess began to shape its identity. Tullus was a king driven by ambition, using warfare as a tool to build Rome's power and reputation. Meanwhile, in 667 BC, across the Aegean, the Greek city of Byzantium was founded. Though far from Rome, this development would set the stage for future interactions between the Romans and Greeks, including trade, military alliances, and cultural exchanges. In 642 BC, Tullus Hostilius died, and Rome saw another transition in leadership. Ancus Marcius, the grandson of Numa Pompilius, was elected as Rome's fourth king. His reign was marked by a focus on both military expansion and civic infrastructure. He fortified Rome's position along the Tiber River, making the city an important trade and military hub. Ancus Marcius understood that Rome's power was not only in its armies, but in its ability to control commerce and communication. After Ancus Marcius died in 617 BC, the Curiate Assembly, Rome's early legislative body, elected Lucius Tarquinius Priscus as the fifth king. Tarquinius was an outsider, a man of Etruscan descent, but his influence would become profound. Under his rule, Rome expanded its influence further, constructing new public buildings and establishing the first sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima. Rome was beginning to lay down the foundations for a great city that would one day be the heart of an empire. From Romulus's legendary foundation to the reign of Tarquinius Priscus, Rome's monarchy left a legacy of warfare, politics, and grand vision. But with each new king, the city grew more complex, its ambitions ever expanding. The world was changing, and Rome was set to play a pivotal role in that transformation. The age of kings would not last forever. Rome's future was on the brink of a new chapter, a future that would be determined not by one ruler, but by the people themselves. In the 6th century BC, Rome stood at a crossroads. Its monarchy was still in place, but internal struggles and power shifts were quietly unraveling the fabric of Roman royal rule. In 575 BC, Servius Tullius was elevated to the throne, not through birthright, but by the will of the Senate. A man of humble origins, rumored to have been born a slave, Servius's rise to power was nothing short of remarkable. As regent, he proved himself a wise ruler, instituting major reforms that laid the groundwork for Roman expansion. He reorganized the military and created a census to better tax and organize Roman society, helping to solidify the Roman state. Servius also oversaw the construction of Rome's first city walls, which would become a symbol of Rome's growing power and its future role as a military juggernaut. But his reign wasn't without its enemies. In 535 BC, betrayal struck from within. Servius Tullius's daughter, Tullia Minor, and her husband, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, conspired to murder the king. This gruesome act was a turning point for Rome. Tarquinius Superbus, after murdering Servius, seized the throne for himself, declaring himself king at the Curia Hostilia in a bold act of power. Tarquinius Superbus, known for his cruelty and authoritarian rule, quickly earned the disdain of the Roman people. His reign, marked by brutal oppression and disregard for the Senate, was one of fear and tyranny. The people of Rome, having suffered under the kings before him, now had a king who ruled with an iron fist. But tyranny would soon meet its match. In 509 BC, a horrific event occurred that would change Rome's history forever. Sextus Tarquinius, the son of the king, raped the noblewoman Lucretia. A woman of great virtue, Lucretia's tragic fate sparked outrage and rebellion among the Roman aristocracy. Her death ignited the spark that led to the overthrow of the monarchy. The Curiate Assembly, the legislative body of Rome, united in a single purpose: to expel Tarquinius Superbus and his family from power. Rome could no longer tolerate a king. The very idea of kingship had become anathema to the Roman people, and they swore never to let one man hold power again. Rome's monarchy came to an end. The fall of the Roman monarchy was a pivotal moment in history, but it was only the beginning of something even greater. With the abolition of the monarchy, Rome embarked on a new political experiment, the Roman Republic. Gone were the days of a single ruler wielding absolute power. Now the power was shared, divided between two consuls who would govern together. It was a bold step, a system designed to avoid the mistakes of kings like Tarquinius Superbus, whose reign had ended in tyranny. In 509 BC, the first consuls of Rome were elected: Lucius Junius Brutus, a man driven by the ideals of liberty, and Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, whose family was closely tied to the royal bloodline of the Tarquins. Their election was a symbol of Rome's commitment to never again be ruled by a single man. Together, they would oversee the city's governance, ensuring that power was not concentrated in the hands of one individual. The seeds of the Republic had been sown, but the struggle for control was far from over. In the early years of the Republic, threats from Rome's neighbors were constant. In 508 BC, the Clusian army marched toward Rome, seeking to take advantage of the fledgling Republic's vulnerability. The Romans, under the leadership of Brutus, faced them in the Battle of Silva Arsia, a decisive moment that solidified the Republic's military reputation. The Clusian forces were defeated, and Rome stood its ground. It was clear: Rome was no longer a city under a king's shadow. It was a republic, and it would defend itself as such. Around 500 BC, one of the most significant developments in Roman history occurred: the creation of the Roman numeral system. The simple yet elegant system of numerals would become one of the lasting legacies of Roman culture, a tool that would help the Romans manage their growing empire, conduct trade, and record history. The Roman Republic, though young, was already proving itself resilient in the face of external and internal challenges. As the Republic grew stronger, it also faced attempts to destabilize its hard-won independence. In 496 BC, the city of Rome faced a major threat: an attempt by the exiled Tarquins, led by supporters of King Tarquinius Superbus, to restore him to power. A coalition of Latin and Etruscan forces, led by the former king's sons, marched toward Rome. The Battle of Lake Regillus was fought near present-day Frascati, and it was here that Rome's military might would be tested. Under the command of consuls, the Romans decisively defeated the invading forces, marking an important victory that secured the Republic's early stability. But while Rome was defending itself from external threats, internal divisions were simmering. The plebeians, the common people of Rome, had long been frustrated by their lack of political power. In 494 BC, their discontent boiled over. Led by Lucius Sicinius Velutus, the plebeians left the city in protest and settled on the nearby Monte Sacro, demanding greater rights. This act of secession was not just a symbol of defiance, but a turning point. Faced with the possibility of losing their workforce, the patricians were forced to negotiate. In response to the pressure from the plebeians, the Senate agreed to increase the number of plebeian tribunes, officials who were given the power to represent the plebeians in the government. The number of tribunes was raised from 2 to 10, a significant victory for the plebeians. The creation of the office of the tribune would become one of the most important developments in Roman history, ensuring that the common people had a voice in the political process. Yet, in times of crisis, the Republic also relied on a unique figure, a dictator. In 458 BC, Rome was once again under threat. The Aequians, a neighboring tribe, had violated their oath and launched an offensive. In response, the Senate appointed Cincinnatus as dictator. Cincinnatus was a humble farmer, but when duty called, he answered. He led the Roman army to victory at the Battle of Mount Algidus, securing a swift and decisive win. Cincinnatus's leadership became legendary. After his victory, he returned to his farm, resigning his dictatorial powers. His brief time as dictator, marked by humility and self-sacrifice, would become a model of Roman virtue and civic duty. In 449 BC, a major breakthrough was achieved. The plebeians were granted the right of veto, a power that allowed them to block laws they believed to be unjust. This was a monumental moment for the plebeians, as it gave them the ability to directly influence Roman law. Alongside this, the final foundational laws of the Republic, the 12 Tables, were passed. These laws were etched in bronze and publicly displayed, ensuring that all Roman citizens, patricians and plebeians alike, could know the law and hold their leaders accountable. In 445 BC, another important reform took place. The long-standing ban on marriages between patricians and plebeians was lifted. This opened the door for greater social mobility and integration between the two classes, helping to bridge the divide that had existed for so long. Yet internal conflict continued to pose a threat to the Republic. In 439 BC, a crisis erupted when Spurius Maelius, a wealthy plebeian, used his grain supply to gather support among the plebeians. The Senate feared that Maelius was attempting to seize power. Cincinnatus was called upon once again, this time to prevent what many saw as a potential coup. Maelius attacked, but Gaius Servilius Ahala, a senator, acted decisively. He killed Maelius, effectively quelling the threat. Cincinnatus once again resigned and returned to his farm after the crisis was over. In 430 BC, a pestilence struck Rome, devastating the population. This pestilence served as a reminder that, despite the Republic's political and military victories, Rome was still vulnerable to forces beyond its control. The Republic would endure, but it would continue to face challenges, both from within and outside its walls. The 5th century BC had been a time of great turbulence for the Roman Republic. Wars, reforms, and internal strife had shaped the young state, but through it all, Rome endured, forging its path toward greatness. The 4th century BC was a period of both crisis and expansion for the Roman Republic. As the Republic's borders expanded and its power grew, Rome would face its most serious external threats to date. Yet, with each crisis, Rome would adapt, innovate, and come out stronger. In 400 BC, as Rome continued to grow, its leaders recognized the need for greater defense. The construction of the Servian Wall was a monumental project designed to protect the city from invasion. Built by the consul Gaius Servilius Ahala, this new wall would encompass the city with impressive fortifications, stretching about 11 kilometers around the city. It became the first true wall of Rome, marking a significant development in Roman military architecture. While this wall would later be surpassed, its construction demonstrated Rome's growing awareness of the need to defend itself in an increasingly dangerous world. But despite this defensive leap, Rome's future was about to face a devastating blow. In 390 BC, the Senones Gauls, led by the chieftain Brennus, stormed the city of Rome, catching the Romans completely off guard. After a brutal siege, they entered the city, looting and burning as they went. The infamous phrase "Vae victis," woe to the vanquished, was reportedly uttered by Brennus as he demanded a ransom for the city's survival. This was a moment of deep humiliation for the Romans, as they had never been defeated on their own soil in such a way. Yet, as tragic as this event was, it ignited a fierce resolve in the Roman people. The Gaulish sack of Rome was a wake-up call for the Romans. Though the Gauls had ravaged their city, the Romans were not defeated. Over the next decades, they would recover and rebuild their strength, determined to never again allow such a disaster to happen. The event would also plant the seeds for the military reforms that would later define the Roman legions. By 343 BC, Rome's attention turned to the Samnites, a powerful people living in the mountainous regions south of Rome. The First Samnite War would mark the beginning of a series of conflicts between Rome and the Samnites, one of the most important and challenging adversaries Rome would face in the early Republic. The war, which began in 343 BC, was the first of three major Samnite wars that would span over half a century. The Samnites, skilled in guerrilla warfare, challenged Rome's military might, but by 338 BC, Rome emerged victorious in the Latin War, ending the Latin League and consolidating its control over the Latin cities. This victory expanded Rome's sphere of influence, further cementing its role as the dominant power in central Italy. As the Republic expanded, so too did its enemies. In 326 BC, the Second Samnite War came to a head. While Rome had won important battles, the Samnites continued to challenge Roman dominance. This conflict culminated in the Caudine Forks in 321 BC, where two Roman armies were trapped by the Samnites in a narrow valley. Surrounded by rugged terrain, the Romans were forced to surrender in one of the most humiliating defeats in Roman history. The Samnites exacted a harsh price for their victory, forcing the Romans to pass under the yoke, a symbolic gesture of submission. The Romans, however, would not let this defeat define them. After a humiliating peace, they would rise once again to challenge the Samnites and ultimately emerge victorious in the Second Samnite War. Rome's strength, forged in the fires of these wars, would continue to grow. Each conflict, each challenge, became another stepping stone in the Republic's journey toward becoming a dominant power in the Mediterranean world. In the 4th century BC, Rome faced its darkest hour, but it also set the stage for its rise to greatness. The lessons learned from the defeats, the wars, and the rebuilding would shape the future of the Republic and lay the foundation for the Roman Empire that would come in the centuries ahead. The 3rd century BC was a defining era in the history of Rome. The Republic's expansion continued, but it was also marked by a series of intense conflicts that tested the very resilience of Rome itself. From wars with the Samnites to the epic struggles against Carthage, this century would see Rome evolve from a regional power to a Mediterranean superpower. The century begins with the Third Samnite War in 298 BC, as Rome faced off once again with the Samnites. This war was a culmination of the previous conflicts between the two, and it would determine Rome's dominance in Italy. The Samnites had once been a serious threat, but by now Rome had become a much stronger and more organized military force. After years of grueling warfare, Rome emerged victorious, effectively ending the Samnite threat and solidifying its control over central Italy. However, Rome's internal struggles were far from over. Despite military victories, Rome still faced significant social and political tension between the ruling patricians and the common plebeians. This conflict of the orders had been ongoing for much of the Republic's history. In 287 BC, the passing of the Lex Hortensia would finally resolve this conflict. The law granted plebeians the same legal standing as patricians, allowing them to pass laws that applied to all citizens. This momentous event marked the formal end of the social division that had plagued Rome for generations. With the internal peace secured, Rome turned its attention outward. 264 BC marks the beginning of the First Punic War, a bitter struggle primarily over control of Sicily. The conflict would pit Rome against its greatest rival of the time, Carthage, a powerful city-state located in North Africa. Carthage was a maritime powerhouse, while Rome was still largely a land-based military force. The war began as a regional conflict, but would grow into a full-scale naval battle for supremacy in the Mediterranean. Despite its lack of naval experience, Rome quickly adapted, building a formidable fleet and engaging Carthage in a series of epic naval battles. The Romans utilized a clever tactic by adding a corvus, a boarding device, to their ships, turning naval battles into hand-to-hand combat, where Roman soldiers excelled. The First Punic War was long and grueling, but in 241 BC, Rome emerged victorious. Carthage was forced to cede control of Sicily, marking Rome's first overseas conquest and laying the groundwork for future imperial expansion. The victory in Sicily did not bring lasting peace. In 218 BC, the Second Punic War broke out, and this time the Carthaginian general Hannibal would lead his forces in a campaign that would become legendary. Hannibal's march across the Alps with elephants to invade Italy is one of the most famous military feats in history. His victories at Trebia and Lake Trasimene showcased his genius as a strategist and tactician. However, his greatest triumph, and the greatest disaster for Rome, came in 216 BC at the Battle of Cannae. Hannibal delivered a devastating defeat to the Romans. It was one of the worst losses in Roman history. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed or captured, and the morale of the Roman Republic was shaken to its core. The Romans, however, did not collapse. Instead, they adapted, learned from their mistakes, and regrouped. In what became known as the Flavian strategy, Rome began to avoid direct confrontations with Hannibal's forces, wearing them down over time through guerrilla tactics and strategic blockades. In 202 BC, the Romans, led by Scipio Africanus, would finally confront Hannibal at the Battle of Zama. This battle, fought on the plains of North Africa, would become the turning point of the Second Punic War. Scipio's forces, using innovative tactics of their own, defeated Hannibal decisively. After years of conflict, Rome had finally triumphed over Carthage. With the defeat of Carthage, Rome had secured its position as the dominant power in the Mediterranean world. The Second Punic War had been a grueling and costly struggle, but Rome's resilience and military prowess had once again been proven. As the 3rd century BC drew to a close, the Roman Republic stood poised for even greater conquests, its influence expanding from the shores of Sicily to the heart of North Africa. The 2nd century BC was a time of both triumph and turmoil for the Roman Republic. With its military dominance firmly established, Rome set its sights on new conquests, while internal struggles and uprisings threatened the stability of the Republic. The century would end with Rome at its height, but the seeds of future conflicts were already being sown. In 149 BC, Rome's rivalry with Carthage, once its greatest enemy, came to a bloody climax with the beginning of the Third Punic War. This war would be a final reckoning between the two powers, and it began after Carthage violated the terms of the peace treaty following its defeat in the Second Punic War. Though Carthage had been significantly weakened, it was not fully destroyed, and this would prove to be Rome's pretext for the war. The Third Punic War was short but devastating. The Romans, led by Scipio Aemilianus, laid siege to the city of Carthage, and after months of relentless fighting, the city fell in 146 BC. Carthage, once a mighty naval power and rival, was utterly destroyed. The Romans didn't just defeat their enemy, they razed the city to the ground, leaving it in ruins. It is said that the Romans sowed salt into the earth to ensure that nothing could grow there again. The destruction of Carthage marked the end of the Punic Wars, but it also marked the beginning of a new era of imperialism for Rome. With Carthage destroyed, the territories that had once belonged to the Carthaginian Empire were absorbed into the Roman Republic, further extending Rome's reach across the Mediterranean. But with victory came new challenges. In 133 BC, Rome found itself embroiled in the Jugurthine War against King Jugurtha of Numidia, a conflict that highlighted the growing corruption within Rome's political system. Jugurtha had bribed several Roman officials to gain favor, and this caused a scandal that led to Rome's investigation of the war. The war itself was not particularly large, but it exposed the deep divisions within Roman politics and military leadership. Ultimately, Rome was victorious, but the war had left behind a bitter taste about the influence of money in Rome's political and military systems. In 91 BC, the social war erupted between Rome and its Italian allies. The war was primarily over the issue of citizenship. Rome had granted citizenship to some of its allies, but many others were excluded from the privileges of being Roman citizens. Tensions reached a boiling point when the Italian allies, known as the Socii, demanded equal rights. Rome was forced to fight a war against those who had been its partners in battle and trade. The war lasted for several years, but by 83 BC the conflict was over, and many of the Italian allies gained Roman citizenship. This would prove to be a double-edged sword, however. While it helped unify Italy under Roman rule, it also led to the growing dissatisfaction among the lower classes of Rome, who felt that the political system was increasingly dominated by powerful elites. In 73 BC, another powerful rebellion broke out, this time led by a gladiator named Spartacus. A former soldier in the Roman army, Spartacus escaped from a gladiatorial school and gathered a massive army of slaves, gladiators, and disaffected people. The revolt became a symbol of resistance to the Roman elite and sparked fear throughout the Republic. The Third Servile War, as it was known, was one of the bloodiest uprisings in Roman history. Spartacus and his forces won several battles, and the rebellion spread quickly. However, the Roman military eventually crushed the revolt. In 71 BC, Spartacus was killed in battle, but the story of his revolt left an indelible mark on Rome, further exposing the cracks in the Republic. Meanwhile, Rome's influence in the Mediterranean was increasingly threatened by piracy and external threats. In 67 BC, the Senate granted Pompey the great extraordinary powers to fight the pirates of the Mediterranean, and Mithridates VI, the king of Pontus, who had been causing havoc in Asia Minor. Pompey's campaign was swift and successful, solidifying his reputation as one of Rome's most capable generals. But it was in the political arena where the future of Rome was truly decided. In 59 BC, Julius Caesar became consul, and along with Pompey and Crassus, formed the First Triumvirate, an unofficial coalition that held immense power. Together they sought to control the Republic's political landscape, each leader pursuing their own ambitions for personal gain. As Caesar led his military campaigns in Gaul, his popularity grew. Meanwhile, tensions between him and Pompey began to rise. In 53 BC, Crassus, the third member of the Triumvirate, died at the Battle of Carrhae, and the balance of power shifted. Caesar's success in Gaul made him a hero, but it also made him a dangerous rival to Pompey. In 49 BC, after a series of political confrontations, Caesar made the fateful decision to cross the Rubicon River with his army, igniting a civil war. The phrase "the die is cast" is attributed to Caesar at this moment, and with it, the Republic began its final descent into chaos. The Civil War reached its climax at the Battle of Pharsalus, where Caesar defeated Pompey decisively. Pompey fled to Egypt, but was assassinated by Egyptian officials in 47 BC. With Pompey's death, Caesar was left as the sole leader of Rome. But even as Caesar's power grew, so did the fear of those who worried he would become a dictator. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was killed on the 5th of March by a group of senators, including his close associates. The killing was meant to restore the Republic, but it only hastened its demise. In the wake of Caesar's death, power struggles continued, and in 43 BC, the Second Triumvirate was formed, consisting of Caesar's adopted heir Octavian, his general Mark Antony, and Lepidus. The trio sought to avenge Caesar's death and restore order, but the true turning point came in 31 BC, with the Battle of Actium. Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra, and soon after became the undisputed ruler of Rome. With his victory, the Roman Republic came to an end, and the Roman Empire was born. Octavian, now known as Caesar Augustus, was crowned the first emperor of Rome, ushering in a new era of imperial rule. In 27 BC, the Roman Republic was no more. The Senate, recognizing Octavian's absolute power, granted him the title Augustus, officially marking the birth of the Roman Empire. Though he maintained the facade of republican rule, Augustus now held supreme authority over Rome, ushering in a new era of centralized power. Augustus quickly set out to secure and expand Rome's borders. One of his most trusted generals, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, played a crucial role in this effort. In 19 BC, Agrippa led a decisive campaign in Hispania, crushing the Cantabrians and bringing the region under Roman control. However, just a few years later, in 16 BC, Rome suffered a significant loss. Agrippa, Augustus's closest ally and the architect of many military victories, passed away. His death left a void in Augustus's inner circle and marked the beginning of a new political landscape in Rome. Despite the personal loss, Augustus pressed on, ensuring stability across the empire. In 13 BC, he returned from Spain to Rome, greeted as the undisputed ruler of the known world. However, tragedy struck again in 9 BC with the death of Drusus, Augustus's stepson, and a brilliant military leader. Drusus had been instrumental in Rome's northern campaigns, and his untimely death was a significant blow to Augustus's vision for the empire's future. With the Republic gone and the empire firmly established, Augustus now stood at the height of his power, shaping Rome's destiny for generations to come. As the Roman Empire entered the 1st century AD, new figures were born who would shape its future. In AD 2, Vespasian was born, a man who would one day become emperor and oversee the construction of the Colosseum. Just 2 years later, in AD 4, Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, better known as Caligula, was born into the influential Julio-Claudian dynasty. In AD 5, another future emperor, Nero, was born, destined to leave a lasting and infamous mark on Roman history. However, these early years were also marked by loss. In AD 6, Marcellus, a once promising heir to Augustus's legacy, passed away, and in AD 12, Julia, the only biological daughter of Augustus, also died, further diminishing the emperor's immediate family. Yet, one of the most devastating events in this period came in AD 9, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. In the dense, unfamiliar terrain of Germania, 3 entire Roman legions, led by Publius Quinctilius Varus, were ambushed and annihilated by Germanic tribes under Arminius. This shocking defeat halted Rome's expansion into Germania and left a lasting scar on the empire, with Augustus himself reportedly exclaiming, "Varus, give me back my legions." By AD 14, Rome faced another monumental shift, the death of Augustus. After decades of rule, the man who had reshaped Rome from a republic to an empire was gone. His adopted son, Tiberius, ascended to the throne, marking the beginning of a new and uncertain chapter in Roman history. With the death of Augustus in AD 14, Rome stood at a crossroads. His adopted son, Tiberius, ascended to the throne, marking a new era of imperial rule. Unlike his predecessor, Tiberius lacked the same charismatic leadership, and his reign was overshadowed by suspicion and political intrigue. In AD 19, Germanicus, the beloved general and heir to Tiberius, died under mysterious circumstances, allegedly poisoned. His death deepened the tensions within the imperial family, further straining Tiberius's already uneasy rule. A decade later, in AD 29, Livia, the powerful and politically astute wife of Augustus, passed away, closing the chapter on one of Rome's most influential figures. As paranoia gripped Tiberius, his trusted advisor, Sejanus, rose in power, but his ambitions proved his downfall. In AD 31, Sejanus was executed and accused of conspiracy against the emperor. By AD 37, Tiberius himself died, and Rome saw the rise of a new ruler, his great-nephew Caligula. At first, Caligula was welcomed with enthusiasm, but his rule quickly descended into chaos. His erratic behavior, extravagant spending, and ruthless purges made him deeply unpopular. In AD 41, his reign came to a bloody end when he was assassinated by his own guards. In the aftermath, the Senate hesitated, but the Praetorian Guard acted swiftly, declaring Claudius emperor. Claudius, despite his initial perception as weak, proved to be an effective ruler. In AD 43, he launched the Roman conquest of Britain, expanding Rome's influence further than ever before. However, in AD 54, he met his end, allegedly poisoned, paving the way for the rise of his ambitious stepson, Nero. Nero took the throne with promise, but his reign soon became infamous for its excesses and brutality. In AD 59, he secured his grip on power in a shocking way, the murder of his own mother, Agrippina the Younger. With her death, Nero removed one of his greatest influences, marking the beginning of his unchecked and tyrannical rule. The death of Nero in AD 68 plunged Rome into chaos, marking the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. With no clear successor, the empire spiraled into a year of political instability, known as the Year of the Four Emperors, AD 69. Galba, the first to seize power, was quickly overthrown by Otho, who then fell to Vitellius. However, as Rome teetered on the edge of collapse, Vespasian, a seasoned general, emerged as the empire's savior. Vespasian secured his claim to the throne and, by the end of AD 69, founded the Flavian dynasty, bringing stability back to the empire. One of the defining moments of his reign came in AD 70, when his son, Titus, led the siege of Jerusalem, crushing the Jewish revolt and destroying the Second Temple, an event that would have lasting repercussions throughout history. Vespasian ruled pragmatically, restoring Rome's finances and strengthening its military. However, in AD 79, he passed away, leaving the throne to Titus, his eldest son. That same year, one of the most devastating natural disasters of antiquity struck, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which buried the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under volcanic ash, preserving them in time. Titus's reign was short-lived. In AD 81, just 2 years after taking the throne, he died under mysterious circumstances, and his younger brother, Domitian, became emperor. The Flavian dynasty had solidified its rule, but more significant challenges lay ahead for Rome. With the assassination of Domitian in AD 96, the Flavian dynasty came to an abrupt end. In its place, the Nerva-Antonine dynasty emerged, ushering in an era of relative stability and wise governance. Nerva, an elderly and experienced statesman, was chosen as emperor. Though his reign was brief, he set an important precedent by adopting Trajan, a respected military commander, as his heir, establishing the practice of choosing capable successors rather than relying solely on bloodlines. When Nerva died in AD 98, Trajan ascended the throne, becoming one of Rome's greatest emperors. Under his rule, the empire extended its greatest territorial expanse, stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. His military campaigns expanded Roman control into Dacia, modern Romania, and the Middle East, while his ambitious building projects, including Trajan's Column and Forum, left a lasting mark on Rome itself. Upon Trajan's death in AD 117, his adopted successor Hadrian took the reins. Unlike Trajan, Hadrian focused on consolidation rather than expansion, strengthening Rome's borders and improving administration. His most famous project was Hadrian's Wall in Britain, built to secure the empire's northern frontier. He also traveled extensively, overseeing the provinces personally and promoting cultural development across the empire. Hadrian passed away in AD 138, naming Antoninus Pius as his successor. Antoninus presided over one of the most peaceful periods in Roman history, prioritizing legal reforms, economic stability, and infrastructure. His reign was a time of internal prosperity, earning him the reputation of a wise and benevolent ruler. In AD 161, the death of Antoninus Pius paved the way for one of Rome's most famous rulers, Marcus Aurelius. His reign would be defined by both wisdom and war as Rome faced growing external threats. The golden age of the 5 good emperors was reaching its zenith, but challenges loomed on the horizon. The assassination of Commodus in AD 192 marked the end of the Antonine dynasty, throwing Rome into yet another period of political chaos. This turmoil reached its peak in AD 193, a year known as the Year of the 5 Emperors, as multiple claimants fought for the imperial throne. Septimius Severus emerged victorious from this struggle and solidified his rule by defeating his rivals and founding the Severan dynasty. A skilled general and shrewd politician, Severus strengthened the army and expanded Rome's frontiers, but his reliance on military loyalty set a dangerous precedent, one that would later contribute to Rome's instability. Upon Severus' death in AD 211, his sons Caracalla and Geta inherited the empire. However, their rivalry quickly turned deadly, with Caracalla murdering Geta and ruling alone. His reign was marked by brutality, yet he also enacted the Antonine Constitution, AD 212, granting Roman citizenship to all free natives of the empire, one of the most significant legal reforms in Roman history. Caracalla was assassinated in AD 217, despite his achievements, leading to a brief period of instability. In the years that followed, Rome saw a rapid succession of emperors. Macrinus, AD 217 to 218, ruled briefly before being overthrown by Elagabalus, AD 218 to 222, a controversial and eccentric ruler whose religious reforms alienated the Roman elite. His erratic reign ended with his murder in AD 222, paving the way for his young cousin, Severus Alexander. Severus Alexander attempted to restore stability, emphasizing diplomacy and governance. However, his reliance on advisors and failure to appease the army led to his downfall. In AD 235, he was assassinated by his own troops, marking the beginning of one of Rome's darkest periods. With Rome now on the brink of collapse, emperors would rise and fall at an unprecedented rate, and the very survival of the empire would hang in the balance. The assassination of Severus Alexander in AD 235 plunged the Roman Empire into one of its most perilous periods, the crisis of the 3rd century. Over the next 50 years, Rome would be torn apart by civil wars, economic turmoil, barbarian invasions, and plagues, leading to the rapid rise and fall of dozens of emperors, many of whom were military generals elevated by their troops only to be assassinated shortly after. By AD 260, the empire had fragmented. In the west, Postumus, a Roman general, seized control of Gaul, Britannia, and parts of Hispania, establishing the Gallic Empire. Meanwhile, in the east, the powerful and ambitious Queen Zenobia of Palmyra took advantage of Rome's instability, expanding her territory and declaring the Palmyrene Empire in AD 268, ruling over Syria, Egypt, and much of the eastern provinces. With Rome divided and under siege from both internal and external threats, it seemed as though the empire might collapse entirely. However, a strong leader finally emerged, Aurelian, AD 270 to 275. A brilliant military strategist, Aurelian waged successful campaigns to reunify the empire, crushing the Gallic Empire in AD 274 and defeating AD 337. The death of Constantine the Great marked the beginning of a new period of division and instability. His sons split the empire among themselves, leading to internal conflicts that weakened Rome's ability to defend its borders. By AD 376, a new threat emerged in Eastern Europe, the Huns. Their arrival triggered a massive migration of Germanic tribes who sought refuge within Roman territory. However, tensions between the Romans and these displaced groups escalated, culminating in the Battle of Adrianople in AD 378. The Visigoths, under their leader Fritigern, dealt a crushing defeat to the Romans, even killing Emperor Valens. This battle shattered the myth of Roman invincibility and exposed the empire's growing vulnerability. Despite these setbacks, Theodosius I became emperor in AD 379 and managed to briefly reunite the empire. However, after his death, the division between the Eastern and Western Roman empires became permanent. Rome itself, once thought untouchable, faced devastation in AD 410, when the Visigoths, led by Alaric, sacked the city. This shocking event signaled that the empire was no longer the unchallenged power it once was. The crisis deepened in AD 455, when the Vandals launched another brutal sack of Rome, further eroding the empire's prestige. The final blow came in AD 476, when the Germanic leader Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus. This moment is traditionally recognized as the fall of the Great Western Roman Empire and marking the end of ancient Rome's dominance and the beginning of the medieval era. Though the Western Empire had fallen, the Eastern Roman Empire, later to be recognized as the Byzantine Empire, would endure for nearly another 1,000 years, preserving Rome's legacy in a new form. Thanks for watching. If you have a story you would like to see a video on, leave a comment, and I will consider it for one of my next historical videos. For more videos like this one, help support this channel by subscribing. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next video.